order. We start with questions to the Minister for Women and Equalities. Jodie Gosling.
Question number 1, please.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Education has a role to play in the prevention of violence against women and girls, and it's so essential to this government's Safer Streets mission. We are reviewing the Relationship, Sex and Health Education Guidance to ensure that it enables schools to tackle harmful behaviour, because we are determined to ensure that misogyny is stamped out and not allowed to proliferate in school.
Jodie Gosling.
I thank my honourable friend for her answer. We know that sexual violence is a critical problem in our schools. Ofsted's rapid report in 2021 found that 92% of girls and 74% of boys said sexist names at some times or a lot. The harassment has grown to be commonplace in educational settings, and this harmful sexual practice becomes a risk. Will the Minister meet with me in the White Ribbon UK to discuss how primary prevention measures can be implemented into the school's curriculum to tackle violence against women and girls?
Mr Speaker, I would be more than happy to meet with my honourable friend to discuss this issue further. I know that she brings real expertise in terms of her background in education. It is essential that we do more to tackle the behaviours that she has identified, and I also welcome the work of White Ribbon, and I hope that honourable members will be able to support that work later this month.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for that response? Minister, when it comes to young boys and young girls in schools, and comes to bullying, it comes to sometimes things that happen at home, and the importance of the relationship between the teacher, the classroom assistant and the pupil is really important to identify problems that can be happening at home and then roll over to school. Can the Minister give us some indication of what's been done to improve that in a way that the children who fall by the wayside can be saved?
The honourable gentleman raises an important issue. It is crucial that our teachers and school staff have what they need in order to tackle harmful behaviour and language in school. It's also sadly the case that sometimes the very staff that he is talking about can be on the receiving end of such attitudes and behaviour, which are completely unacceptable. And as Education Secretary here, where it comes to schools in England, I'll do all that I can to make sure our school staff and teachers have the support that they need in tackling such behaviour.
Given Bonavia.
To Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, with your permission, I will group questions 8, 9 and 14 with this question. This government is committed to using all the levers at our disposal to deliver our mission to halve violence against women and girls. We have already announced our intention to embed specialist domestic abuse advisors into 999 control rooms, launched pilots for the new domestic abuse protection orders, and implemented a duty on employers to anticipate when sexual harassment may occur and take responsible steps to prevent it.
In Bonavia.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I was very pleased to hear that from the Minister. I am proud that in Stevenage, independent domestic violence advocates and independent sexual violence advocates working for survivors against domestic abuse, also known as SADA, do brilliant but challenging work supporting those at risk and suffering from domestic or sexual abuse across Hertfordshire. There is no doubt that IDVAs and ISVAs are a key part of domestic abuse provision across the country. So will the Minister provide assurances that the Government will continue to support them in the vital work that they do?
Yeah.
I thank my honourable friend, having done this work myself. I'm more than happy to champion and praise the work of ISVAs and IDVAs, as he might imagine, we will use every tool available to us, including these vital roles, to target perpetrators and address the root causes of abuse and violence.
Alice MacDonald.
Mr Speaker, recently I spoke to the Chief Constable of Norfolk Constabulary, who told me that if a suspect was arrested and charged with a serious sexual offence such as rape today, the Crown Court trial could commence in spring 2026, over a year's time. This is totally unacceptable. What is the Minister able to do to reassure women in Norfolk waiting for their cases to be heard?
The first thing I'd say is that it is totally unacceptable, and it is, I'm afraid to say, a legacy of a totally failed justice system. We know that due to the complexity, rape victims are often left to wait disproportionately longer than others who are already waiting too long. As part of our manifesto, we have committed to fast-track rape cases. We are carefully considering, along with colleagues at the Ministry of Justice who lead on this work, the best way to do this, and we will set out our plans in due course.
Hartley Chapel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I recently joined a Reclaim the Night march in Greenhead Park in my constituency. The first of these took place in Leeds in the 1970s. And of course this is still important because a woman is killed every 3 days in the UK. So can I ask the Minister what actions we are taking to prioritise reducing the level of violence against women and girls and also to create safer environments at night?
I thank my honourable friend. The first march was in 1977 and the progress has frankly been too slow that we still need to march. We will use a cross-government transformative approach to halve violence against women and girls, and that will be underpinned by a new violence against women and girls strategy to be published next year. And this will include drastically improving the police and criminal justice response. Prevention and education are also absolutely fundamental to this approach, and we will work across key departments, including the Department of Education, to tackle the root causes of these crimes.
Thank you,
Mr Speaker. Pupils in my constituency are benefiting from pioneering workshops designed to increase awareness of sexual violence and misogyny through a project called Don't Steal My Future. Does the Minister agree with me that raising awareness of sexual violence in an age-appropriate way with young people is a vital way to keep them safe? And if so, will she agree to come and meet the team at the Rape and Sexual Abuse Support Centre North Wales with me?
The simple answer is yes, I do agree. And as somebody who has written and delivered these programmes in schools myself, I know that there is brilliant work going on across the country in local authorities, multi-academy trusts, and wider with voluntary sector organisations doing a lot of this work. I would be glad to explore with officials the best way to learn from those who are working with children and young people, because we have to really work out what is going to work in our schools and then make sure that we put it out everywhere.
Speaker, in the last Parliament, from the backbenches, we have tried and failed several times to make misogyny a hate crime. Legislation can be a powerful game changer. Isn't it time we make misogyny a hate crime?
The government is absolutely committed to tackling misogyny both before it starts and when it exists, and current looks into hate crime reviews are being undertaken, and I'm more than happy to meet with her as somebody who's met with her many times on this subject before.
Blackman.
Thank you, Speaker. Women fleeing domestic violence are vulnerable, in desperate need of support and help, but often local authorities who are supposed to help don't actually enable women to get a place to live or their benefits. In the last Parliament, we tried to make sure that women in those circumstances could have a relative claim those benefits. What action is the Minister going to take to ensure that those women are given the support that they need in their desperate times?
I couldn't agree with him more, and I remember his valiant efforts during the passage of the Domestic Abuse Act to ensure that local connection, for example, the government has committed to ensuring that local connection does not apply in cases such as those that he is talking about. But the Department for Work and Pensions, with regard to benefits, are very much part of the mission group on violence against women and girls, and I will absolutely raise his points, and we will seek to make sure that when and wherever people crop up with these issues, that their local authorities and local systems are in place.
Mr Speaker, in 12 months to July 2024, there were 22,403 violence against women and girls offences recorded in Northern Ireland. Can the Minister outline what discussions she has had with the PSNI in relation to stronger conviction rates for such instances of violence?
I have spoken to the PSNI, the Chief Constable of the PSNI, in the last week. You have to forgive me, the days all run into one, but it's within the last week. And his request was very much that we go over to Northern Ireland, which is planned for early in the new year. And I would very much welcome working with colleagues from this House and also the devolved government to make sure that we are all working together on this.
Adam.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. A constituent of mine came to see me a couple of weeks ago in undue distress, as you can imagine, as she was a victim of rape in 2021. She has now been given a date of 2026 for her final verdict to be heard. I'm sure the whole House will agree with me that that is completely unacceptable. But the point and the question I would like to ask the Minister is that she has been denied access to mental health support during this time because it may impact her defence. So I would like to ask the Minister what her thoughts on that matter is.
I would like to say very clearly from this dispatch box that if awaiting trial, it is a total myth that you cannot access mental health support. I would like that to be stamped out for good across all agencies. It is something that has crept in over the years, and it's. I ran a rape crisis service that definitely served people waiting trial. I would very much, as her Member of Parliament, push back on that assertion and say that that is certainly not the policy.
Christine Jardine, the Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Data shows us that women of colour face disproportionate rates of homicide, that adults of black or black British and mixed ethnicity are more likely to experience sexual assault than those of white, Asian or other ethnicity. And these challenges are just as common when it comes to domestic abuse. They are less likely to access support services than white women. We desperately need stronger action to support these vulnerable women, so can the Minister tell me how the Government will ensure that we help more women from ethnic minority backgrounds to get the support they need and end the injustice that they face?
I couldn't agree with the Honourable Lady more, as you might imagine, considering the seat that I represent. But what I would say is that we need a strong buy-in for service in our country, and to ensure that it doesn't matter the geographical location of where you are in the country, actually that there is available specialist services for black and minority ethnic women and other actually marginalised groups, whether that's disabled, victims of domestic abuse in the armed forces, for example. There needs to be a specialist approach for specialist groups, and we will be making sure that is part of our violence against women and girls strategy.
Question number 3, please, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With permission, I'll answer questions 3 and 7 together. Our manifesto committed to championing the rights of and working with disabled people, putting their views and voices at the heart of all we do. We want a more inclusive society, removing unnecessary barriers which too often have held disabled people back.
I thank the Minister for his response. I want to draw his attention to the fact that almost 1 in 5 people in my constituency of South Derbyshire is classed as disabled. And after 14 years of Conservative government that slashed public services, there are still far too many people in South Derbyshire that report that their daily activities are significantly limited by their conditions. So what more can this government be doing in South Derbyshire to support disabled people in accessing both care and career and educational opportunities?
Well, my honourable friend, in describing her constituency, speaks for the whole country. I think disabled people and people with health impairments are very diverse, so we want to promote diverse specialist initiatives to support people to stay in work, to get back into work if they've lost their jobs, and to progress in work, including joining up local employment and health support. And we need to remove barriers to accessing services as well.
Sarah Lloyd, Chair of the Select Committee.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I am sure many of us will welcome commitments from the Government to remove barriers to work for disabled people. But disabilities charities have outlined some concerns about the Government's plan for work capability assessment reform, changes to PIP and the Access to Work scheme. Will the Minister please commit to working with disability charities to ensure that any changes to these schemes, including any proposed from the previous Government, are made alongside consultation with the people these policies will affect?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and I can give that assurance. We are committed to, as I've said, putting the views and voices of disabled people at the heart of everything we do, and in looking at these issues, consulting properly and amply with disabled people and with their organisations.
Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker.
nowhere are disabled people more discriminated against on Britain's railways, and the previous government had an Access for All scheme which would allow disabled people to get to platforms which were otherwise inaccessible. It's been put on hold by the new government. Can the Minister tell me what discussions he's had with his colleagues in the Department for Transport, and when we might see stations like Whitchurch accessible to people who can't manage steps?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm afraid I can't talk about the situation at Whitchurch, but she speaks for many, and there have been some very high-profile and very troubling instances of problems in this area over recent months. And it's a good example of the kind of issue where, as ministers, we need to be talking across government departments and making sure barriers, like the ones that she's described, are removed. We're determined to do that.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Young women and girls in my constituency travel abroad, and some to stay with relatives for several weeks or months. They get into difficulties or are impacted by safeguarding issues. Will the Secretary of State confirm what support is available to help repatriate such girls who have dual nationality and have, in many instances, false allegations made against them by perpetrators who don't want them to leave the country?
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman. I think this is perhaps a question that belongs more to the earlier set than to the current one, but I'm very happy to make sure that he's written to set out the support that is available.
Caroline Boulder.
Question number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, we are laying the foundations for all employers to create conditions that enable women to return to work and to thrive in their careers. As part of our efforts to make work pay, we will improve access to flexible working, strengthen workplace protections for new mothers and review the parental leave system.
Caroline Boulder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Parents of preschool children in South Devon are finding it all but impossible to find places at nursery or preschool due to the lack of places and the financial pressure that such establishments are under, which is making it extremely difficult for parents, often mothers, who would like to return to work after having children. So I'd like to ask the Minister how the Ministry of Education and the Equalities Office will work together to increase the number of nurseries and provide them with adequate funding to ensure that women are provided with all the support they need so that they can return to work.
Yeah. I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady. She is right to identify that accessible and affordable childcare is essential for making sure that women in particular are able to work the hours that suit them and progress in their careers. That's why we have confirmed that we will be expanding government-funded childcare an additional £1.8 billion. And as part of that programme, we will be rolling out 3,000 new or expanded primary-based nurseries. Applications are open, Mr. Speaker, and schools are encouraged to participate.
The ABPG for Domestic Abuse and Violence was reconstituted this week, and as Chair, I'm pleased to report back that at our first meeting, we heard from survivors and organisations supporting those survivors who are in the workplace. The Minister will be aware that the gender pay gap persists, and does she agree with me that more could be done to support survivors in the workplace, such as having domestic abuse policies in every workplace and considerations of paid leave and flexible working so that survivors can get the life-changing support that they need and continue to stay at work?
I agree with the Honourable Lady, and I would just add to her, before I came to this place, Mr. Speaker, I ran a women's refuge for women and children affected by domestic violence. During that time, I saw some really good examples of where employers were able to support women going through a very difficult time in their lives. There is more that we can ask of employers. There's more that we too as government are committed to achieving, especially around areas such as the gender pay gap, action plans that we will be taking forward, and halving violence against women and girls.
Senate Secretary Mims Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's working women who will pay the price for Labour's budget of broken promises, with employers' national insurance making working people worse off and affecting childcare settings. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation says single-parent families 80% are headed by women, on average, will be £1,000 worse off by October 2029. Has the Secretary of State assessed what additional negative impact to the labour market the hidden scrapping of reforms to child benefit changes to single-parent households will be, as they've been described by Martin Lewis as unfair and a penalty to single-parent households?
Mr. Speaker, we are committed to transforming the lives of women across our country, and that applies to single parents too. I'm leading the Child Poverty Task Force with my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. Unlike the last government, we are committed to making sure we drive down the number of children growing up in poverty. They left a shocking record where it came to rising levels of child poverty, and this government will turn it around.
We go over to topicals. Daniel Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to draw the House's attention to Islamophobia Awareness Month. No one in our country should be targeted because of their faith or race, and British Muslims are a crucial part of Britain's history and of our society. More widely, the Office for Equality and Opportunity is already making great strides. The new Employment Rights Bill will legislate for a stronger duty to prevent sexual harassment, and action plans will cover the gender pay gap and menopause issues. And we will open a consultation on extending pay gap reporting and equal pay rights to ethnic minority and disabled people.
Daniel Francis.
The disability charity Sense estimate 200,000 disabled children across the UK are struggling to get the right school support, given funding issues and a need to employ more multi-sensory impairment teachers to ensure deaf-blind children can access education. Can I therefore ask the Minister what steps she's taking to ensure disabled children are represented in the forthcoming Children's Wellbeing Bill?
My honourable friend champions the rights of disabled children. He is right to do so, because the system that we have at the moment, where it comes for support for children with special educational needs and disabilities, just isn't working. And the recent report from the National Audit Office showed that all too clearly. I'm determined, Mr. Speaker, to listen to parents, experts, charities and others to make sure that we reform the system to provide more timely intervention and support for children and families, and make sure that all children in our country are able to thrive.
So, Secretary Clerk Coutinho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honoured to take on this role, and I should pay tribute to my predecessor, who will next be at this dispatch box. The Equalities brief underpins values that I cherish: fairness, freedom, meritocracy and equality under the law. I believe people should be judged by the content of their character, not the colour of their skin or any other identity characteristic. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that equality is not about group identities or placing one section of society on a platform above another, but about individual freedom and responsibilities?
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the right honourable lady to her place. I do look forward to working with her on areas where we can agree and where we can take such concerns forward on a cross-party basis wherever possible. I believe that she, like me, is passionate about tackling violence against women and girls too. And absolutely, in terms of what she sets out, I believe that everyone in our country should have the chance to achieve all that they are capable. And our mission across government is to make sure that where you're from doesn't determine what you can go on to achieve.
Speaker. In the election, the Conservative Party committed to clarifying the definition of sex in the Equality Act 2010 to protect women's rights. At the end of this month, For Women Scotland versus Scottish ministers will be heard on the UK Supreme Court. This case will have far-reaching consequences for sex-based rights. So can the government assure the House that it's now clear that the definition of sex in the Equality Act 2010 means biological sex?
Mr. Speaker, the right honourable lady will appreciate that I won't comment on ongoing cases, but what I can be clear to her about is that the Equality Act 2010 does set out that providers, for example, have the right to restrict access to service on the basis of biological sex. This government is proud of our achievements in legislating for the Equality Act. We will make sure that providers can continue to support single-sex exemptions, and it is important that providers have clarity in this area, and I'd be happy to work with her to make sure that that is the case.
The picture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask if the Minister will have discussions with the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government on how pavement design and layout can be improved to enhance navigability for the blind and visually impaired people?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is a very good example of the kind of discussion we need amongst ministers responsible for disability across government. Department of Transport guidance on inclusive mobility and on tactile paving services does advise how design and layout can inform visually impaired people, including about hazards and directions, and I'm happy to pursue the subject further with him.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The voluntary organisation's Disability Group represents over 100 charities, including MENCAP and SENSE, and they've said the budget will have life-changing consequences. The CEO has said the Labour government is letting them down. They're talking about the NICS increase that will put risk to frontline services. So what is the government going to do to mitigate this case for those charities when they're so important for disabilities?
I can say to the honourable gentleman that we're working very closely with disability organisations, and I pay tribute to the work of those that he's referred to. And we're certainly going to be making sure that barriers that too often confront disabled people get removed by this government. And that's the mission that we're on.
Dr. Becky Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to...
We like you that much.
According to the Darcy report, there has been a substantial decline in the social determinants of health, such as poor quality housing, access to clean air and good nutrition. How is the Minister working with Cabinet colleagues to include health in policies which address these social determinants of health and tackle the health inequalities and the legacy of the Conservative government left for this country to deal with?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend who brings real expertise to the House in this area. We are committed to tackling the social determinants of health across government and to tackle the stark health inequalities that sadly blight the life chances of too many across our country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During a hospital stay, my constituent, a new mother with an exclusively breastfed infant, encountered resistance from staff when trying to keep her child with her. The distress caused left her needing PTSD therapy. What steps is the Minister taking with government colleagues to ensure hospitals support breastfeeding mothers appropriately?
The Honourable Lady raises an important point, and I'm very sorry to hear about her constituents' experience. I will make sure that a Health Minister picks up on that point and has a conversation with her because, of course, new mothers, including those who are breastfeeding, absolutely deserve the right level of support and advice.
Debbie Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Australia, Canada, Germany and the Netherlands have called upon Afghanistan to cease what the countries say are violations of the UN Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. This is the precursor before action up to the ICJ. Will the UK be joining them?
Mr. Speaker, please forgive me, I didn't quite hear all of the Honourable Lady's question, but I will make sure that the issue she identifies is picked up with the relevant Minister and that she receives a full response.